Tonight we have a fantastic keynote for you, and I'm very excited to introduce it. In 2019, US-based Sledgehammer Games embarked on a mission of global expansion, with Melbourne as its first destination. In just 3 years, the Melbourne studio has been fully established AAA studio, today having over 150 members and a brand new facility. In this fireside chat, Jason Imms of Keyword Studios is sitting down with studio manager Greg Palstra to talk about the journeys the studio has taken over the last 3 years, the experience of shipping Call of Duty Vanguard, and what the future holds. Please welcome Greg and Jason to the stage.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Come on. All right, hello, friends. As Sav said, my name is Jason Imms. I'm the head of QA at Keyword Studios Australia, but I'm here today to have a bit of a chat with my new friend, Greg Palstra, Melbourne Studio General Manager at Sledgehammer Games. So please, again, give it up for Greg in a big way. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
My pleasure. We're here to talk to you today, amongst some other things, about Sledgehammer's presence here in Melbourne, the Australian game-making scene more broadly, and shipping Call of Duty Vanguard during a global pandemic. But first, I'd really like to start by asking you some questions about yourself, Greg, and what's led you to being here today, because anyone who knows or remembers my unfortunately long-dormant podcast, Game Hugs, knows that I really like to start an interview with something really familiar. Something that people are really used to talking about, because we tend to find some fun little things to discuss in there. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to hear about your career history, Greg, and from there, I'm confident we'll discover some threads and points of interest to dive a little deeper on.
Beautiful. All right. Yeah, I've been in and around games for 25 years now. I was thinking about that you might ask this question and thinking about what actually got me excited about building video games, from a really early age. And I was on holidays with my family up in Queensland, and there was a Space Invaders machine that was a new thing for us. And my dad was feeding quarters into it, and I was competing with my older brother and beating my older brother. And I think that just set me on the path, right, of building games. So I knew all through primary school that I wanted to do something in that space. We had an Atari 800, which I would get CNVG magazines and compute, type in the programs that were there, play the games that were available to me in that space, and then tinker with the code, and learn how to do it. So from there, went to RMIT and did a computer science degree, and from there straight into a startup, and worked on some games. We just did not know what we were doing at all, but really passionate about it, and met some great people. And from there, worked at multiple small studios around Victoria, and spent some time up in Sydney working for Brilliant Digital Entertainment. And then some time at Taurus and other studios, where I know there are people here that have worked in those studios as well. And eventually wanted to get out of games for a little while, and worked in enterprise point of sale systems, which I quickly learned I did not want to do for very long, and came back to games and stopped programming altogether, joined EA, which was part of Visceral, down in local here, and came on as a development director. And that's really how I've spent the remainder of my career. So I spent many years with EA, for Visceral, building things like Dead Space and Dante's, and then when the GFC hit, moved to Canada and went to become part of the FIFA team, and had a really good experience working for that group. I was there for about 5 years and shipped multiple FIFAs and worked my way up through the organisation, and honestly learnt more about how to run teams and hit quality and hit deadlines in the 5 years I was there than I had in the previous 10 years trying to figure it out, in Melbourne. So a really valuable experience for me. And we moved back to Melbourne for family reasons, and I joined the Fire Monkey studio. Stayed there and learnt more about women's hairstyles than I thought I'd need to know. And then it was actually the person who hired me into EA originally, Andrew Lacey, who was then working for Sledge, and said, hey, we've got a small studio and they want to take it big. Do you want to come down and do what we did and what we learned, doing it in Melbourne at EA, and come and do it for Sledge and do it properly. So it absolutely resonated with me and jumped at that opportunity, and I've been there about 3 years.
Awesome. Counterintuitively, I'd actually like to ask you more about your work on point-of-sale systems.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Because it's a bit of a bugbear of mine that I feel like in the community we have a bit of almost a shame around needing to take a job outside of games. I failed somehow taking a job outside of games. And as someone who had to do that multiple times, and therefore I'm biased, I actually learned heaps doing it. And as an employer, I feel like people who've had experience outside of games, especially in enterprise where often kind of rigor and process have more years of tried and true testing, I think that makes them a more valuable employee. But did you have a different experience? Yeah,
I didn't view it as a failure moving out of games at that point. There was a lot of instability in the industry at that point, and I was having babies and trying to buy a house, and I needed that certainty around a paycheck at that point. Moving into the point of sale industry, I really did recognise the differences between what games was doing and what that industry was doing. And some of it was good and solid. Like working for the banks, you learnt how to build something against a really heavy specification, and those things had to work, right? There was no margin for error in that space at all, so learn a lot about how to do that. But also recognised immediately that the cross-section in that industry was far less eclectic than the groups that I was used to working with in games, and I missed that vibrancy and I missed that diversity, and was really, really happy, honestly, to get out of there and come back to games.
Mm-hmm. If I'm not careful, it's going to turn into a QA talk, so I'll let that go now. You spent 10 years as a development director at EA, or you spent 10 years at EA, some of which you were a development director.
Yep.
And I find FIFA a really fascinating kind of space within games. Can you tell us something, I think, maybe surprising, or something that we don't know about delivering FIFA compared to delivering other types of games, or is it just another type of game?
FIFA, you're going to ship, right? So, and you know the date that the game's coming out at, and you work backwards from there. And the thing that I understood really quickly at that organisation was this game will ship on time, and the subtext was, with or without you. You know what I mean? So get on board, make it happen, this game's going out. So that certainty around that and you being part of making that happen was something that I hadn't really experienced before. Dates, quality, deadlines, things like that were more fungible, but at FIFA it was like, no, this is happening. Let's get on board, make it work.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you were approached to move from EA over to kind of help Sledge get more established here.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that transition process for you?
Yeah, it was, I don't know if anyone's spoken to Andrew. I think he just makes you feel incredibly valued and welcome, so takes you down and gets you drunk and tells you that, he wants you to come and work, right?
Just games industry things.
I'm sure some people have had that shared experience as well. But it really, for me, resonated really strongly. When I left Melbourne, it wasn't because I wanted to leave Melbourne, it's because I wanted to continue to work on AAA products. And post-GFC, there just weren't those opportunities. So having the opportunity to be part of standing up another studio and recreating those opportunities for the people who still wanted to do similar things to the things I wanted to do was just something that was really kind of a no-brainer for me, And then the biggest change for me personally was moving out of the development director space that I'd spent a long time learning and felt really confident of my abilities about what my lane was, about who to do that work, how to train people to do that work, and moving into the GM space where I didn't know how to do it. There's a whole new set of boundaries, a whole new set of challenges. So stepping into that, knowing that I just had a huge amount to learn was, quite confronting.
How did you go letting go of that development director history and letting other people carry it for you?
I probably should ask my development directors, but...
That's the next Fireside.
I think as I progressed through my career, I spent a lot of time trying to make myself redundant in my role and moving on to the next thing, solving the next problem. So bringing people up and empowering them and teaching them how to do that job well, and then backing off and letting them do it, it's the only way you make it possible for yourself to take on the next big challenge. So I think really I've approached it that way, that I try to work in a way that teaches people how to do the role. I can absolutely inject my opinion and my experience into what we're doing in the development direction space, but ultimately I want those people to do that without my intervention and trying to teach them how to do that so that I can go on and solve the other issues that are facing me.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. All right, Sledgehammer, let's start with the obvious question. Why Melbourne and why Australia? There are certainly cheaper and more time zone friendly parts of the world that you could be based. So why did you decide to establish such a large presence here?
Yeah, Melbourne has, actually I should contrast it to the work we did at EA, right? Because when we were, not at EA Fire Monkeys, but at EA Visceral, when we set that studio up, it was a cost-based decision. The Australian dollar was really favourable, and we were basically that intermediary between Foster City and somewhere like India. And when the dollar changed, the value proposition disappeared. A whole lot of people were left without work, right? And it was devastating for the group that was there. I was not going to enter into a situation like that again and bring people on that journey. So talking to our CEO and the studio head, Andy and Aaron, they recognised the really super rich talent pool that exists in Australia. And it was absolutely a resource play. They knew that there was a huge untapped opportunity to come down and leverage the talent that existed and capitalise upon that. And that was a huge part of why I was more than happy to come on board, right? As the dollar fluctuates and ebbs and flows, the people are here, the talent's here, the enthusiasm's here, and the attitude and hunger from the Australian games scene without a sense of entitlement is just something that's really served the studio, Melbourne studio, well and the product really well. So that's the main reason I was really happy to come on board and do that.
Cool. All right, so if Melbourne's a great city to make games in, that's great. Is it a particularly great city in which to make Call of Duty?
I don't know, I haven't thought about that question.
Good.
I think... You're laughing at.
Stop heckling, Alana.
I think that Call of Duty has a particular, it's a really strong brand and a particular flavour. There are, actually, I think in a way the answer's no. I think that there are the strengths that I'm talking about of the people that are here and the indie culture that's developed. I don't think that sits really heavily with a company like Activision and a product like Call of Duty, right? I think people have found a way to build games that are far more personal and far more intimate and far more just unique, than a big AAA shooter, right? So I think there's a certain cross-section of the people here that want to make that, and the skills are absolutely transferable, don't get me wrong, but maybe, AAA first-person shooters aren't the sort of things that those people want to do. So, yeah, I don't think it was like everyone was itching to build a shooter, but the skills are transferable, the people are fantastic, and the people that have come on board, I think, have had a really great experience in what we've been able to deliver.
Yeah, great. And do you feel there's something special about the talent pool in Australia compared to other parts of the world? I'm not asking you to make a direct comparison to any other particular part of the world, but what's special about the people?
I've worked with teams around the world, and the talent is equally strong here. I think I said it before, there's a different attitude, though, for the people here. I think there's less cynicism, and there's a real hunger to still deliver things on the world stage. And that, I think, does set us apart from some other locations that have been, I guess, spoilt a little bit by the opportunities that they've had. People recognise the power and the quality of the opportunity that we have in front of us and really want to embrace that and deliver strongly against it.
Awesome. All right, how does Sledgehammer currently relate to the incredible indie scene? Aside from staff moving into the studio, are there other ways in which Sledgehammer relates to the indie scene in Australia?
So I think what we're trying to do at Sledge is create another part of the ecosystem in Melbourne and Australia that allows people to move between those different types of studios and experiences. I know that we've got people who are working for us that would rather be working for us to establish and set up AAA studios so that people, rather than teaching that they've had offers to do, because they want to be part of establishing the locations, the destinations for people to go to, you know, when they've done that work through their education. And I think that's part of the role that Sledge can play in Melbourne. So not tightly intertwined with India, even though we have a lot of people from India studios, we're not collaborating in that way. We are a harbour, I think, for those people that want to take a different step in their career, and we provide that opportunity to learn a different set of skills that you've learned, you know, in the indie space.
Cool. And it's kind of related, but what responsibility do you feel as a large studio, as a cashed up international money studio, what responsibilities do you feel to the local scene? And are there ways that you're intentionally giving back?
Yeah, I feel a huge amount of responsibility if I thought that Sledgehammer's presence here or other large, you know, sort of AAA studios, multinationals, was a threat in any way to the industry. There's no way I'd be embracing it the way that we've done it. I think we deliver competition, we deliver salary, we deliver opportunity, we deliver a learning environment. And I think the more that happens and the more opportunity, the more choices that individuals have to work within this space, I think the stronger the industry in Australia, Victoria, is going to become. And I think that's the role we can play. And I also think that coming into this, one of the big reasons I wanted to do it was not only to build an amazing team around a super strong brand, but to build a culture and an environment that really delivers a best-in-class experience for the people who work for us. So being part of that and surrounding myself with people that share that vision and working every day to try to create a space that not only delivers great product, but delivers it in a way that really supports and nurtures the people that we have on board, like that's one of the things I think we can absolutely do.
Awesome. It sounds like a stability play too for those people, right? Yeah. So how do you feel about the stability, or how do you kind of project the stability of the Australian game scene, and how do you think it might change over the coming years, more broadly?
Yeah, I think we're growing, right? I think there's the tax incentives that we have, the demonstrated ability that we've shown of being able to come in and set up a studio here. And even like the numbers of attendance at conferences like this, like it's growing fast again, right? I think there's a huge opportunity, and the quality of the people that we have, and like I said before, not just being seen as a financial play, a cost centre, I think it sets us up really well. I'm really bullish about the way Victoria and Australia is going to develop over the coming years. And as each large studio and even the smaller ones build up, anecdotally, we've had people say, hey, I'd love to come and work with you. If it doesn't work out, where can I go? So I'm all for it. If you and anyone else comes down, we set up these studios and we create, hopefully, a hub like Montreal where you have this opportunity, you draw all these fantastically talented games developers into the space, and if you move between studios, I think everyone that I've worked with at another location before, right? So yeah, I want to be part of that and I want to help grow that, and I think everyone who comes down and follows the example that we're setting in terms of AAA adds to the vibrancy and the viability and the long-term future of Victoria and Australia in games.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned it before, but and most people in the room will know that more than a decade ago, the game scene here suffered a catastrophic collapse. A studio after studio shut down in the wake of the global financial crisis, the rising Australian dollar, and the ceasing of the $14 million federal interactive games fund. And as you mentioned, a large portion of Australian game makers left, either left the industry or left the country. And we lost studios and we lost livelihoods. Yeah. That was really awful. But as one of the many Australian game makers who completely justifiably sought employment overseas during the crash, now that you've come back, how do you feel that today's Australian game making scene differs from how things were back then in 2008? Yeah.
The biggest difference has really been there were a small number of really large studios and nowhere near the vibrancy of the indie scene at that point. Through those years, I just remember watching the other studios sort of fall, around us, and EA was one of the ones that went down late in that space. But yeah, some people left, a lot of people went overseas, some people went out of industry, but everyone else who wanted to continue making games just moved into the indie scene, right, and created, over the last 10 years, what is an absolutely thriving indie space. So I think, it's obvious that's the massive difference now, right, that there's a sustainable, diverse, creative, vibrant culture of game development that didn't really exist at the same level, back when the GFC hit.
How do you feel about the increasing international investment in Australian talent that's happening now? Does it mirror what happened back then, or is it, aside from the kind of expanding indie scene, is there something different about that investment this time around?
Yeah, I don't know if I have much more to add than what I said before. I think what's different about it is that the talent pool here is mature, and when we started the studio, we had a remit of hiring 50 people. I said, let's see if we can do that. And we smashed through that, and then we went to 70, then we went to 100, then we went to 150, and we could keep hiring if we needed to. That ability to bring in quality people of all disciplines on that sort of time frame, there's just so much here to leverage. Yeah, so I think the investment makes sense, and yeah, I'm honestly happy to be a part of it.
Good. I know for myself that I've been, in my darker days, I paint a picture of the current position that we're in, and it reflects a lot of what happened previously. And as you've said, the indie scene is much stronger now. Mm-hmm. I think we're in a much stronger position. I totally agree with you. But we obviously want to keep strengthening as a community nationwide. But whose responsibility is it? Is it the game makers? Is it the big studios' responsibility? Is it the government's responsibility? Is it all of us?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I think it's all of us, right? I think we all have a role to play. None of those institutions can solve this problem right by themselves. We need to create the opportunities that we do, and we need to create space for people coming through at different levels of their career. But the government support that allows that ecosystem to thrive, it's fundamental as well, right? I can't create all the tiers in the industry for people to work through and learn their chops and establish themselves. So I think everyone has a part to play in that, and the more that we all take on that responsibility and recognise that we're not, even though there's some hiring pressure and we're competing with studios in a way like that, but we're actually making it better for everyone. And I absolutely think that, it's every organisation has a part to play in establishing that and making it stronger. And the government's stepping into that space strongly. And I think they recognise and understand, when we talk to them, the role that they can play and the complexity in the layers and the way it feeds in to each studio, and that we can build something if we all have that longer term goal of creating an industry, not just a company.
Mm. And a scene, not just an industry, right? Yeah. It's broader than just the businesses. I'm excited about the rebate. That's really great. It's obviously only available to studios over a certain size. I'm excited to see some grants programs changing that will help studios get to the point where they can access that if they want to. I'm also personally keen to see some changes around making sure that our emerging practitioners have junior opportunities at larger studios, but also people who just want to make beautiful little things and have zero intention of growing big businesses have a place to work and a place to play. Do you feel like that's something the government should be spending a portion of that pie on? Yeah. Or is it better to focus on business?
No, I agree with you. I think the scene creates the enthusiasm that we see here. And things that you mentioned about some of those junior positions as well, that's something that we can do too, right? Take on an eclectic mix of interns and bring them through that space and create those opportunities. But yeah, creating not just an industry, but a community and being part of that, it's fundamental. It's what emerged and what holds this group together, as we go through the different tribulations, right, that we've suffered over the last couple of decades. So yeah, any part that we can play in being part of that community and growing that community and establishing that network of people that that want to be part of this industry, excited about this industry, and fill all the ancillary corners around the straight game dev stuff that we do, yeah, I think we have a huge responsibility, and it's massively important for the state. Yeah.
All right, we're going to change gears a little. I don't know about any of you all, but I cannot begin to tell you how amazing it feels to be back here again with you all in person at GCAP, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But we all absolutely know all too well why it's been so long. We've been through an incredible amount over the last few years. The pandemic's taken its toll on all of us. So I'd like to dig in a little bit. We'll get back into happier stuff later. In the topic of delivering games, especially large-scale games, to market through the challenges of this debilitating pandemic. So given that you've opened and staffed a really large and very beautiful, apparently, new office, I can't imagine the last few years of fear, worry and lockdowns have been easy. Can you tell me some of the strategies that you used to get through it?
Yeah, it's. I think I was telling you this story the other night when I started. In my first couple of months, I was standing in the temporary office that we had and smelling the bushfires, the smoke from the bushfires, and we're organising masks and air filters. And I was looking out the window thinking, oh, this is going to be the most difficult thing I have to sort of field, you know. And then 2 months later, we're pushing everyone out of studio into work from home arrangements and ferrying equipment to people and trying to just keep things rolling, you know, as we push people out for what we thought was going to be a short amount of time. That type of adversity, if you've had the luxury of building your teams and creating those bonds and creating that camaraderie, you can leverage that when that adversity hits. We built this team under that duress, you know, pretty much from day one. And it's amazing to see what the team did in being able to grow so fast in a remote location, distant from each other, under the pressure of a looming deadline, you know, and still deliver really strongly against that idea. What became really apparent to me through the pandemic was it was like tightening a vice on everyone's personal circumstances. And I know that, you know, we didn't create the adversity that people were living through, but it just expressed itself so strongly and so acutely and in so many ways that a lot of those 2 years of managing at Sledge was about dealing with those personal circumstances and helping people through just an amazingly difficult and really different set of circumstances. And some people really liked the remote work. It, you know, enabled them to cut down a huge commute and things like that. And other people were stuck in a one-bedroom apartment, you know, with, you know, a partner and babies and other things. And it was incredibly difficult. And there were people with really difficult personal circumstances that were just, you know, suffering because of the lockdown, the uncertainty, the pressures that was building. So yeah, a huge part of what the management team was doing was finding ways to depressurise the situation for those people, providing what help we could and support and get them through that so that they can come back healthier and stronger through that period. But yeah, but not the 2 years that we had planned when we first started.
Did you have any strategies for just the day-to-day of it? You know, a lot of companies have experimented with, let's all do fitness activities on camera and all those kinds of things that some people really enjoy it.
We
didn't love it.
We went through a bunch of those things, like leaving voice chat open or having VidCon things set up, and they all sort of came and went, honestly. I don't think anything really stuck. And that was the really difficult part for me. Like in studio, you can see, Trent, I was talking to him about it last night, but you can, the humanity is present, right? You can see how people are, you can see what's going on in the way someone enters or exits a room or how they're waiting at the coffee machine. Like having that all just disappear and trying to fill that gap remotely, it's been an incredible challenge, and I'd love to hear from anyone who solved that really well, but that part for me has been the most difficult because we know that a large percentage of our team is doing really well, but there are corners of our teams that haven't found that connection and are struggling in ways that we're not aware of, and our visibility into that has just been diminished. And we've we've impressed upon the leads the necessity and the managers to reach down into their teams and ask them how they're going and really connect with everyone. But all the things that we tried, I don't think any of them stayed, you know? And it just came down to, you're responsible for this set of people, get to know them well, talk to them as often as you can, and ask them the question, you know? And then when we did identify problems, it was immediately depressuring for that group and allowing them the time and space they needed to recover, and just recognising that everyone was having a shit time. You know?
I know for myself, when obviously it's a different situation in Tasmania, you all had it much worse. I fully acknowledge it, don't at me. But I'm a massive extrovert, and when our borders opened back in Tassie, I stayed at home for 6 months. Don't at me. And I went back to the office for the first time, and one of my colleagues was there, and we just talked about nothing for most of the day. Like all the incidental chats that you have when you're in an office, we had them all at once, all in one go. And I didn't realise how much I needed it.
Yeah.
And so I assume you're kind of moving back toward the office now, and more people are working from the office. Is it still a hybrid situation for you all?
So we don't have a huge uptake back at office at the moment. We've got 100 plus desks on the third floor and probably another 50 being built downstairs. We might have 20 something people in on any given day. We're not forcing people to come back in. Parts of the organisation tried to force a hybrid model, and it wasn't received well at all, let's say it that way. So we're working to entice people back in and incentivise them, but we won't mandate it, right? We want to preserve the flexibility, and we want people to be able to make the choices that make them the most productive, and I trust them to do that. The challenge for us really is that there is absolutely a set of behaviours that we don't get to see well, right? That don't work as well remotely. And an easy solution to say just everyone come in and those things will be fixed. What we're challenging the team to do at the moment is to solve those problems in a remote location, because there are huge benefits for people to have that flexibility, but we can't embrace all those benefits robustly if we're not solving the interaction and the visibility and some of the humanity issues that we see, right? So I want the teams to work out the right way to utilise the space. What's the right way of working in a truly hybrid model? And I don't mean like come in 3 days a week, but why would you want to come in? Is it onboarding a new person? Is it war gaming, you know, for a couple of weeks to solve this particular problem? Is it coming in to use particular facilities that you don't have, you know, at home? But I don't see the sense in sitting, you know, if you're sitting in your office at home, to come in and sit in an isolated office at work. There's no benefit, right? So I think, and we're on the journey to figure it out, but why do you want to be together? What's the benefit you get from it? How do we maximise that? And trust people to find the best ways to maximise their productivity and their efficiency and their connectedness across all those vectors in whatever model works for them. But we are experimenting and playing, and we have not solved it by any stretch of the imagination yet.
I doubt anyone has.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping you had, and then we could share it with you all.
Here's the answer.
What about with the work? Do you feel like the team's relationship with the actual doing of the work has changed through this process, as opposed to the relational and human parts of it? What about the work?
I think it depends. It's different depending on what type of work we're talking about. There's the focus that I think people can achieve at home helps massively, right? But the difficulty of collaboration in that space is incredibly challenging. So I think there are pieces of work that have been far better and people have been far more productive with, and there's been other pieces that we've just been unable to achieve the same sort of velocity and cadence, and we haven't been able to iron out the little enclaves that form, you know, to some degree. So I don't think there's anything particularly unique about our situation, but yeah, that focus, that isolation, that way that you can just get what you need to get done versus the collaboration and that over-the-shoulder comment, you know, and I have someone just at my disposal, we can look over a monitor and chat, like all that's missing, which makes some elements of our jobs, you know, just considerably harder. Yeah, it's a mixed bag for me. I think it came out a bit like a wash, but it's absolutely a mixed bag.
I definitely hear in like media circles that people feel like we haven't seen the end of the effects of it yet. That as far as releases are concerned, regarding the rate at which games are coming out at the moment, the quality at which games are coming out at the moment. Do you have any insights into that from your perspective?
So about how remote work affects that?
The ongoing effects of the pandemic on the games that are coming out and the rate at which they're coming out.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for us, the rate isn't going to change, right? The dates still come faster than we'd want. I don't think it's affected that for us at all, right? We've always had to achieve huge things on short deadlines, I don't see the cadence shifting because of the circumstances that we're under. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to start wrapping this up now. So I'm going to hit you with a super duper and impossible to answer broad question.
Okay.
And then we're all going to watch you squirm. Is that cool?
Perfect.
So far at GCAP, we've heard many expressions and explorations on the theme of ambition. We heard Ran and Tim from Witchbeam talking about the all-consuming ambition to make something personal and beautiful and to share it with the world, followed by the ambition to find stability in the future. Zalavia this morning spoke beautifully about survival and finding new ways to make games that prioritise safety and care. And I'd love to hear your mind on how Sledgehammer fits into these, not necessarily universal, but definitely relatable ambitions.
Yeah, I thought you'd ask me a question about ambition.
It's kind of in the theme.
Yeah, it's given in the name. For me, my thoughts around ambition have changed considerably over the time I've been, since I was a kid, I guess, and wanting to be my brother, to being... And I never characterised myself as an ambitious person, but I had a strong desire to build something in the games industry, right, and deliver product. And I think the role now, with the experience that I've had and the studio that we've been able to create, what I hope that Sledgehammer can do is be a home, a place, a harbour where we can allow people to achieve their ambitions. So that, for me, is the big draw card of what I'm doing. The reason that I'm coming to work every day is to create that space for other people to live their journeys. And I think Sledge can play a huge part in creating that space for other people to realise, their desires.
Wonderful. Well, on that lovely note, I think we might call it there and give everyone a slightly early minute. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful.
Cheers, Jason.
Thank you. Just hurl those at me. You can just smack me with them, it's all right. Whack. All right, everybody. So we've only got one day left of all of this. So firstly, a big thank you to Greg and Jason for that. Let's give them another round of applause. Now, I do know that since it is, Tuesday of Migwa, that does mean that there's about 40 different types of dinners going on at the moment. So I will release you out into the world to go to your various different things happening. Thank you so much for another wonderful day at GCAP, and I will see you here again tomorrow morning, bright and early.